And next up from Mrs. Frost's class, Tara Halliday.
Dear veterans, thank you so much for risking your lives. I really appreciate it. When I say the pledge, I respect the flag. Even if I am young, I want to stop wars. You are very brave and generous. When I grow up, I want to be just like you. You've done so much for our country. It must have been hard to leave your family. You are very special to me. When I think of you, I think of respect and dignity. With care, Tara.
And next up from Mrs. Gagno's class, Megan Giesler.
Dear veterans, thank you for serving our country. It must be hard to leave your families. Your families must have been worried about you, but you did not give up. You stayed strong and persevered. You worked very hard to protect our country. I'm glad you care so much about our country. We thank you for everything you ever did for us. You fought for freedom and you gave us freedom. You are the true heroes of our country. Thank you.
Very nice, Megan. And next up from Mrs. Motkowski's class, Sarah Ferris.
Dear veterans, thank you for keeping us safe. I am sad that other soldiers had to die. Thank you for protecting our school, students, teachers, and homes. Have you ever fought in a war before? Were you hurt? If you were, I would feel sad. You must feel happy to see your family again. Thank you for the peace in our country. Our country is a better place because of the armed forces. From Sarah.
Very nice, Sarah. Next up from Mrs. Peralta's class, Miles Vasta.
Dear veterans, thank you for serving in the military. Without you, things would not be the same. They would be very different. I think veterans are the kindest, bravest, strongest people I know. You are so brave to be willing to go fight for freedom. Thank you for all the other things you do, like helping people in need. I think veterans are some of the most important people. Sincerely, Miles.
Nice job, Miles. And the last third grader from Mrs. Stager's class, Caitlin Dion.
Dear veterans, thank you for fighting so gallantly for our country. You are very strong. We are very thankful we have you. I appreciate all the men and women who did their best. On this very special day, I think of you. I am so happy I have freedom. Sincerely, Caitlin.
Nice job, Caitlin. Moving on to our fourth graders. From Mrs. Connody's class, we have Sean Waddington.
Dear veterans, thank you for all your service to our country. I know that it must be scary, and I'm sorry to friends and family that have died. I can relate because my grandpa was in the Vietnam War. He was in the Army. So thank you to all of the men and women who have served for us. I also know that the time you spend away from your family can be sad, but we all think about you and hope you're safe while you're keeping us safe. Also, thank you so much for your service and being here today. With care, Sean.
And next up from Ms. Cortson's class, Ian Saunders Brevner.
On Veterans Day, I honor my Uncle Kevin. He is a United States Marine. Kevin has been in the Marine Corps for 20 years. He was an enlisted Marine for 6 years, and he has been an officer for 14 years. Uncle Kevin has decided to join the Marines because he felt they were the best branch of the military, and because his Uncle Tom was a Marine. Uncle Kevin trained at Parris Island for boot camp and at Quantico, Virginia for officer candidate school. He still trains all the time. He runs a lot and has shot targets with rifles and pistols. In 2008 to 2009, Kevin was developed in Iraq. Kevin says Iraq is hot and a dry desert and has lots of open land. When he was in Iraq, our family felt worried, and we were so relieved when he came home safe. I am so proud of my Uncle Kevin because he's serving our country. He helps us keep our freedom. He is a hero to me and my family, and I love him very much.
And next up from Mrs. Heiniger's class, Hannah Johansson.
Mr. Anderson is a member of my church, so I see him every Sunday, but I never knew he served in the military. When I found this out, I sat down with him and asked him many questions, and this is what I learned about Mr. Anderson. Ray Anderson served in the U.S. Navy from March 1943 to April 1946, and liked the time that he was in the military. The Navy is the branch of the military that has their operations at sea. Mr. Anderson started as a boot camp for 8 weeks in Newport, Rhode Island. The Navy gave him a test, and because of his answers, they told him he would be a great electrician, even though that wasn't his first choice of jobs. After boot camp, he was sent to 16 weeks of electrician training in Rhode Island, and then went to New London, Connecticut, where he spent 6 more weeks in submarine school, and then came 6 more weeks in advanced battery training. Mr. Anderson had a lot of training to get ready for the submersible torpedo boats that he is going to be stationed on. He was the electrician that was responsible for understanding the electrical parts, and especially the batteries on these boats. A lot of this work is monitored by computers today. Mr. Anderson's longest time spent away from home was 12 months, spent overseas in the South Pacific Ocean. This was the ocean near California. He missed his family very much and wrote them letters while he was away. A recent trip Mr. Anderson took was to Washington, D.C. with Honor Flight Rochester, and he visited many of the sites and monuments there. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for serving our country. I appreciate it very much.
Wonderful job. And so next up, from Mrs. Hetzler's class, Megan Thurley.
An interview of Victor Wahlberg. For my report, I am doing my grandfather, Victor Wahlberg. He was in the United States Air Force, USAF, for 7.5 years active and 12.5 years in reserves. He liked being in the military because he was flying airplanes. My grandfather was stationed in Texas, Arkansas, Taiwan, Vietnam, and Michigan, and Spain. The longest time away from home was 1.5 years stationed in Taiwan and flying in Vietnam. He missed his family, so he sent and received letters and tapes. He was at speeds, the airplanes were at speeds of 120 miles per hour through Mach 1.1. My grandfather has not jumped out of a plane in his lifetime. He has almost flown around the world during his time in the USAF. He was in the Vietnam War. When he was in the USAF, he actually slept in beds. He trained for 90 days to be an officer
and 1 year to be a pilot. He trained in Texas. The planes he flew were T-41, T-37, T-38, C-130, and KC-135. Those were 5 different types of airplanes. When he was graduating from college in 1969, the draft was still going on. He didn't want to take a chance and be drafted into the Army, so he joined the Air Force. He already had a pilot's license at 16 since his dad was a pilot and taught him how to fly. In today's military, it is voluntary to go into service, but during the Vietnam, the government had the draft. If they picked your number, you would have to join the military unless you got an exemption. For example, if you have a medical problem or have a critical job, you would get an exemption, so you don't have to join the military. This was all my grandfather, Victor Wahlberg, and thank you for listening to my speech.
Very nice, Megan. And next up from Mrs. Rhines' class, Nellie Huntick and Allison DeCane.
My veteran is Doug Stewart. He was an Army Lieutenant Colonel. My grandfather is my hero. He liked being in the military to serve our country. He was stationed at Fort Benning, Fort Knox, Vietnam, Germany, and Fort Meade. His longest time away from home was 1 year in Vietnam War. He went in training for 1 year at Fort Benning before he went to war. He slept wherever he found himself. He slept in fields or at fire base camps. My pappy traveled in helicopters, an airplane, a jet, a tank. He drove the tanks too. He received several awards, one of the Bronze Stars for his valor in serving in Vietnam.
Very nice, Nellie. And now we'll hear from Allison DeCane.
Good morning. My name is Allison DeCane, and I interviewed my papa. My grandpa, Hilaire George DeCane, served during World War II as a Navy pharmacist mate 3rd class. He was in the Navy for 3 years, beginning in 1944. He had no choice whether or not to be in the military. He was drafted. However, he stated that he still liked it. He was in training for 4 months in Bethesda, Maryland. He was stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. His longest time away from home was for 90 days. He missed his family very much when he was gone. That's why he wrote letters back and forth with them. He worked on a ship in an operating room, helping the doctors. His ship was not that fast and went 20 knots. In his ship, he traveled across the North Atlantic Ocean, the regular Atlantic Ocean, and the Caribbean Sea. He didn't win any special awards or anything in the military. I don't know why, but maybe because he only joined in at the end of the war. His time in the military, working with the doctors, made him want to be a doctor himself. After being discharged from the military, he came home and went to medical school. That's when he became the best pediatrician ever.
Very nice, Allison. And now on to our top of the school, our 5th graders. From Mr. Clark's classroom, we have Maggie Siriano, Dylan Cahill, and Grace LaFay.
Thank you, veterans, for being here today. We'd like to say what heroes means to us, and